we're looking at the reprex package, which is a package by Jenny Bryan from RStudio, which is going to be useful for making small reproducible examples. Okay, so the main, we've already saw that you can install it with installer packages, reprex. This is really the version you want to install, the release version. You don't want to use any other versions. So how can you actually use this? So the idea is that if you want other people to help you fast, first of all, you want to try to like document all the steps of what you did, right? So that normally involves having you know, some R code, right? That documents all the steps that you did, such that people can help you, right? So let's just use the basic example here, which is we assign a variable 1 to 4, and we compute the mean, right? And maybe we want to ask, why is the mean 2.5 and not 3, right? Maybe that's a question we want to ask, right? So something that people typically will do is they will select the code that they ran, copy that, and then let's say on one of our help desk channels, they'll be like, you know, they'll paste that, right, on Slack. And they'll be like, okay, like, you know, why is the mean 3, right? Sorry, not 3. And so they might do that, right? What is the problem with this, right? I'm not actually going to post this, right? What is the problem with this? Let's say Nina looks at my question, right? And Nina's like, how can I help Leo with the question, right? So Nina sees that code, right? She'll be like, maybe I need to run some code myself, right? Maybe this code is not clear to me exactly what the object Y is or all of those things. So maybe she opens R, right? And then it's like she, you know, wants to copy paste the code, right? What is the problem at this point? Well, you're not copying code anymore. You're copying text that looks like code, but like these greater than symbols, those are called the R command prompt. And so if you try to execute that, it is like, oh, I don't know what, you know, there's some errors here, right? So if Nina actually wants to run this code that, you know, Leo asked, she has to, you know, copy and paste every line of the code. And this is like simple code for it's a single line, right? But it could be stuff like this. Oops. And so, you know, if Nina wants to help with this, she has to figure out that she has to copy that part of the code that doesn't have the greater than. Then she has to copy the part of the code that doesn't have the plus sign. But like, you know, if there's a ggplot2 code, there might be some plus signs that are actual valid code. And then that parenthesis, sorry, that bracket. So this is, you know, quite a bit of work. It makes it hard for people to help. So, and this is such a common scenario where like people will like post, they're like, oh, I posted the code online. I gave you everything you need. You know, here you can see, here you can recreate the Y object. I gave you all the code that I ran. I'm even giving you the output of what it was, right? It should be really easy for you to try to help me, right? So how can we make it easier? So that's where the reprex package comes into play. So I'm going to load that package. And so I'm just going to, you know, copy the lines of code from my console. This is Leo, you know, that has a problem and wants to ask a question. Copy those lines of code. And then once I copy them, I can run the reprex function without any arguments. And you'll see it's doing some stuff in the back. And it opened a little website here on the RStudio viewer panel on my right side, which if I click over here on the showing new window symbol, I can see it on the actual browser. And this file is actually, you know, a temporary file, but it says like, oh, here's the code you can copy and paste, right? So you can copy and paste this code now, and Leo that is asking the question on Slack or a different tool can still do is the mean 2.5 and not 3. Then let's say Nina sees the question and she's like, oh, I want to like, you know, run the same code. Maybe I need to look at the objects a little bit more, things like that. So she can copy paste the code Leo wrote, go to her, paste it, and this will actually run, right? So what is reprex doing? Leo copy pasted the greater than Y arrow 1 to 4, greater than mean parenthesis Y. The reprex function, what it did was like it recognized what parts are R code, what parts are not R code, and reran it itself on a new version of, on a new session of R behind the scenes. once you had the output of that new session of R, it made it into a tiny temporary website, such that you can easily copy and paste the output from that little temporary website. Or you could, I mean, you don't want to take a screenshot because then like Nina can't help you. You take a screenshot, then that like Nina can't even copy paste the code, right? But and so that's the idea of this reprex package. It has a couple more things, but that's the basic of it. And the function that we use is the reprex function. This package has more functions. I'm going to just open the help file for the reprex function and see what other options it has. And so right now, when I ran it without any arguments, reprex parentheses, what it did was it read from the clipboard, right? Because I had copied the code that I wanted to ask. But it can also read from, you're opening if you have RStudio open. So let me just change my clipboard to, I'm going to copy that. But let me just select a couple lines here. Reprex, in theory, I think, maybe I need to actually give it an argument. We'll see what it's doing. So I did use the clipboard, sorry. I guess if I wanted to use the RStudio session that I have, we might need to change some argument, but it can do it. So, okay, so you can also give it an actual input X, and then you could also say what type of file you want to reprex to produce. You can say like, I want to actually generate a .r file that I can use later. You could also say like, I want it to be like the Git flavor version of Markdown or other file formats like Stack Overflow Markdown. That's like, if you already know where you want to ask your question, right? But in general, you don't need to get that complicated. You just need to copy the code you want to ask and then run the reprex function in order to get a website like this that you can then copy paste the code to. So the details of what it's actually doing, this reprex function package, is actually, so it does parse the text that you gave it. It removes anything that is not needed, like the greater than symbols. But then it also runs it in our R Markdown version, but it changes the R prompt. Instead of the greater than, it made the R prompt to be hashtag greater than, such that the output would appear as a comment in R, right? So it's just like doing some little tricks there. And so that's how beautiful this little package is. Now, the problem really here comes, once you learn about this package and the reprex function, the main problem is the previous part, which is having a small block of code that you want to share, right? And so, because it has to run it again, right? And like, let's try this. So I copy the granges command, then I run the reprex function. And what do we see on the little website? It tells us like error, could not find the function granges, right? Why is that an error, right? Because this is running valid R code on a new R session, right? It's not completely valid because we haven't we didn't include the line of code to load the package in order to make the example fully reproducible. So now I can copy those two lines, select them, copy them, run reprex. I was running a new R session with the lines of code that I gave it. And now I'm gonna open that on my browser. And now it's like, oh, okay, loading the package, a bunch of messages from loading that big package, and then the function itself. And here I made a syntax error. I missed the column before the plus. That's why we're getting an error. But like, that could be the example, right? That could be the situation where someone is like Leo is asking Nina, like, oh, why am I getting an error here, right? And then Nina's like, oh, look at it. Like, you have a syntax error here. You're missing the column before the strand symbol. This is also great for learning what parts of code are needed for people to help you, because Leo could just have pasted like this stuff to Nina, right? The greater than space granges chromosome 1 : 1-1000 plus. But then Nina would have been like, oh, I don't know where this function comes from, right? What packages does this come from, right? That's why you need to include the library statements, what packages you're actually using. And all of this is just to try to make it easier for other people to help you faster, right? So those are the main advantages of this reprex package. So I don't know if you have any questions about it.
I was kind of wondering how this would show up on, like, if you were running something on the cluster and you didn't have like the RStudio GUI, what that would look like.
Okay, so let's do that actually. So I'm gonna open the terminal panel from my RStudio. I'm gonna log into the cluster, request a computer node with QRSH. Let's open R here. So one way you could do things is you could have the packages installed in your own computer, right? And run the reprex in your computer. Let's say we're working on the terminal and we see an error, right? And we want to ask help for it, right? So here I'm gonna select those lines, copy them. Then on my console pane, I can run reprex, right? And so for this to work, I have to have the packages also installed in my laptop. And then it will make the little website, right? Now, if I wanted to run this on the cluster, then we need to use the actual full syntax of reprex, or let's see, I think we need to give the full thing. Ask me if I want to open the file. I'm going to say no, but I know where this is.
Okay, so it just creates like the file.
So let's see, a segmentation fault issue there. I'm just trying to copy and paste to sync it. No, it doesn't exist anymore. We ran into a complicated situation, and I had to something completely failed. But like, shouldn't be the case. And maybe I need to play around a bit more to actually get this up and running on the cluster. But we should be able to find a way to make it work. And that could be just based on, I'm using like a beta version of RStudio, so maybe I have a problem there. In theory, you could also run it on the cluster. But I mean, what I would probably do is I like to keep the same packages that I have installed on the cluster also on my computer, because that way I can open like the help file a lot nicer. I can open them like on my computer instead of like opening them in the terminal. Well, in my case, I already have other stuff installed to make it easier to look on the terminal.